Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The Sparkfile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, your one-stop business in the front, party in the back for creative inspiration.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell. If you're joining us for the first time, you are so welcome. You may be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File? Where do I get one? What do I file in it? These are such good questions, and we have got answers.
A Spark File is a place where you consistently collect all your inspirations and fascinations.
Here's the deal. We are makers, and we make all kinds of things.
If you're anything like us and making stuff all the time, or you want to be making stuff all the time, you know that the wellspring of inspiration can run a little dry.
So we're on the lookout for fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark our creativity and pique our curiosity, things that inspire us to get up off of our asses and make things like this podcast.
Or a wildly popular social satire series that captures a cultural moment.
Or a business that allows you to use all your creative wisdom and experience to support others who want to create.
Or a practice that helps people to collaborate well in the corporate space.
Or a family of curious, creative, and even sometimes mathematical little people.
On today's Makersode, we're going to talk to two people who truly spark us.
And those special folks are Nicola Kraus and Emma McLaughlin. Nikki, Emma, welcome to
The Spark File.
Thank you for having us.
That is the longest introduction in show business.
Beautiful.
Gentle listeners, you're going to recognize those names because Nikki and Emma were featured in our recent Sparkisode, that's a new word I made up, on the topic of collaborative writing. Among many other titles, these little baby geniuses wrote the Nanny Diaries.
That's right. Hey, I feel before we launch or get too far down the road, we should probably sort out the sound of our voices.
Yeah, we are four white ladies talking, aren't we?
We are. We are. Can everybody say your name and something really distinct about yourself?
I will go first. This is Susan. You can't see it, but something distinct about me is that I have sort of gray silver hair. If someone's cussing, it's probably going to be me. And for the duration of this interview, I'm going to distinguish myself by using the voice of Gwen Verdon. Who wants to go next? Just kidding. Wouldn't that be annoying?
We can't have another voice in the mix.
And the ghost of Gwen Verdon is here.
I'll say this is Laura, and you can't see me, but I have brown hair that is graying. If someone is crying, it's probably me. So you'll hear that in my voice. Who wants to go next?
This is Nikki. I have brown hair that is going gray, so I'm deciding to highlight it.
Yes.
I feel like this could be a thing. I'm trying to start a trend.
I'm right behind you. I'm on it. I'll follow that trend.
Nikki, how are we going to know your voice?
This is my voice.
This is the voice that I have.
I've been told that it is a little nasal. Does that distinguish me from the other participants?
You have a lovely voice.
Thank you.
Fabulous voice.
True story. I used to sell drug tests to prisons. When I was acting and needing money.
This interview's got everything. What?
Tell us more.
They would have inmates answer the phones, and some of these guys would just keep me on the phone talking to them about whatever. I was like, "Oh, I'm providing 2 services."
Oh yeah,
Hold on
at
a
least
second.
2.
You sold drug tests like in bulk?
Yes, for SmithKline Beecham to prisons.
You were like a drug rep,
Yes. Well, I worked for the drug
but
rep.
for a very specific drug testing
yes.
product.
Are inmates empowered to purchase? Do they have purchasing powers?
They were supposed to pass me to the warden or someone who
see.
was authorized, but mostly we just chat.
Yes.
That is amazing, and that does distinguish you.
This is Emma, and this is what my voice sounds like. And a distinguishing characteristic of me, if you saw me in person, is that I am in denial about wearing glasses with my aging eyes. So I'm either gripping them or wearing them on top of my head and spending half of my thoughts about how dirty they are and how that's factoring into your perspective on my capabilities. There is a portion of my brain running about 2%, 24/7 on if you are seeing the spots on my glasses, and it's informing your sense of my competency.
Wow.
But I should say, you may not distinguish my voice from Nikki's, which is part of what the story is. Our voices have been indistinguishable forever, and if we weren't fucking great with that, we would not be sitting here. So I don't need you to pick out my voice.
Oh,
Look at that.
I will say that.
awesome thing to say.
What a generous spirit you have. Do I feel,
Well, it's tested. We've been talking for 15 years as one voice. The chances that she's about to say something that's going to fuck me is minimal. It's extremely. It's a well-tested theory. I'm not just like open girl.
I was going to offer this terrible idea, but maybe we don't have to. I was going to say just for a little while until we get rolling, maybe like you would do on a terrible conference call, everyone says their name before they speak, but fuck that. Everybody it's a free for all. Everybody, we're just right now, we're just one big talking white lady.
We're the boys. We are.
Great.
I'm great with that.
Great. All right. Great.
Facing aging with as much style and determination as we all can.
Great. Then I'm just going to jump in. You know that the price of admission to the Spark File is to, real quick, just tell us some creative risk that you've taken recently.
I am writing a graphic novel right now.
Oh?
It's YA sci-fi, and every single thing about that fills me with terror on a daily basis. I sit down in Albert Brooks sweat before every round of working on that.
You
But I
in that sweat.
persevere. I won't let the fear stop me, and I'm very close to having it be finished.
Amazing.
Are you drawing it as
I am
well?
thankfully not drawing it. A wonderful man named Eric Donovan is doing the illustrations.
Amazing.
I just have to come up with a story that is science fiction and also science and involves teenagers who I'm getting farther and farther away from every day.
You got this.
Yeah, thank you.
That's courageous. I think that qualifies.
When you are sitting down to write this YA science fiction and you are scared, how does that manifest for you?
There's a little bit of avoidance. I will watch a little YouTube every day, but I suddenly can find that I'm like so deep on Facebook that I'm reading some grandmother's recipe for something that I'm like, okay, get it
I'm
together.
never going to make this recipe.
And I say to myself, if you don't do the thing right now, you're going to feel exactly like this at 5 o'clock. Yeah. But if you actually pull your socks up and you write a few pages, you're going to feel great at 5 o'clock. And don't you want to give 5 o'clock you the gift of feeling great? And that's what makes me do it.
I'm saying this to myself. I'm saying it to you, Cams, and I'm saying it to all the listeners. This is a person who is a very seasoned writer who still wrestles with that resistance on the regs.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
I don't think it ever goes away. If it does, you should start doing something else.
Really?
Yes.
I'm waiting for it to go away.
The terror lets you know that you're doing something that's really exciting and worth tackling.
Right. Make friends with it.
It's the things that don't scare us anymore that become our day job. The thing we just kind of show up, we do it, we know we can do it, we go
I
home.
think it's interesting, though, that the terror that you're describing manifests itself. And I think this is true for so many people. The terror manifests in the most mundane way, a deep, deep, deep relationship with Facebook, like that, or like just like totally addiction to Candy Crush. Like it manifests in the most slippery way.
Oh yeah, I should absolutely fold the laundry. You know what? I feel like the dishwasher's been a little funny. Maybe this is the moment I should look up how to fix it or get in touch with someone. And an hour's gone by.
Yes.
It's sneaky.
So how about you, Emma? What's your price of admission?
Well, I, as you know, have left writing, which is, I would have 24,000 examples for you in just the last hour of the fears I faced. But now I work as an executive coach, and I recently had a string of things I had to do run on my own. I had been with a firm in between partnering with Nikki and to train myself and get up to speed in the field. So I was running sessions, usually with another coach, with a partner. And I had a 24 hours where I was both facilitating a very senior major thing alone for the first time now in my own business on the heels of presenting to a very intimidating senior group of people a whole presentation on my own for the first time.
Wow.
And it
big.
It has been a series of sort of stepping out with my voice.
Yeah.
And there's just the basic habit of turning to no one. We are so trained to nod encouragingly, semi at each other, not really.
We're doing it right now.
We cross our legs at each other. Like we're so trained to draw the eye to whoever's talking.
Yes.
So there's the basic.
So you try to throw it to somebody who isn't there.
Yeah. The first time I spoke without Nikki, I started by saying hi. I've always worked with a partner. We're just going to decide she's here for the sake of this presentation, and you'll find it endearing, I'm sure, shortly. I sort of still hold that in my head.
Did it have sort of an imaginary friend quality to it?
It does. She's always with me in that sense, in the best sense, and I think. On the flip side, part of the complexity of having a creative partner is that you give them all of it. You imbue them as the audience, and you imbue them as the judge and jury. And it's a lot to carry, right?
Yeah.
And how much of that is they nobody wants any of it really, And I think over my last couple of months of being solo, I'm realizing both the holding it all myself and the responsibility, and that when there's no one to toss the ball to. But I think alternately, it's that judge and jury now sits entirely with myself, and that's tremendously liberating, because no one's going to say to me 3 hours from now, having built up to it over a couple of cocktails, got me nice and relaxed, to say, next time we come at that material, maybe it would be a good idea if, that's not coming.
Yeah.
Right. And that's exhilarating. But then also the next thought is, well, then who's going to tell me?
Yeah.
Right.
When you're keeping your own counsel.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you really, so it's just in the ongoing process of individuating.
Now, I think if you have listened, I guess this is a late time to mention that if you haven't listened to that piece on collaborative writing, that spark that I shared with Baby Cams, you might want to go back and give it a listen, or don't listen. Do this however you want to do it. But after writing together for 15 million years, I think, give or take, you decided to consciously uncouple your words. Just give us all context. How long ago was that?
4 years now?
Yeah.
4 years. And when did you engage in this work with coaching, Emma?
Well, I should say it's the work I was doing right out of school when we started writing together.
So you returned to it.
So I've returned to it, but I probably it was about 3 years ago. I took about a year to sort of find my way.
Yeah.
And we launched the Finished Thought, our business that we have, and Nikki is now fully running with. And then that really affirmed for me that this kind of work was what I really feel born to do.
Yeah.
And so I sought out a firm that would train me and give me sort of the fundamentals that I had not gotten. And then I went into private practice about a year ago.
Amazing.
I think this is particularly interesting just to note, like, so from what I understand, you didn't like fully pursue individual careers before your success together, right? Your success together came pretty young, quickly after college-ish.
I had been acting for 4 years.
Okay.
And I decided that was not a good use of my time on the planet.
Word. Word.
You give joy to so many people. I was giving joy to people on the Lower East Side.
Hey.
And I did not want to give those people
We've
joy.
also given joy to people on the Lower East Side. No shame.
They need joy too. So you were acting, but you were like, no.
No.
Okay.
And and it was actually delightful in my last year. I didn't have to have day jobs. And that actually gave me the space by really doing it constantly. Be like, oh, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And so I thought I was
love
going
that you
to
learned that about yourself,
Yeah.
and that changing your choice was you embrace that.
I was like, let's do this.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
suddenly did not want to be looked at. And, you know, unless you have a great voice, which I did not think I did, well, that eliminates a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to finish out my pre-med requirements and apply to med school. I was also teaching yoga at the time, and that seemed like a viable career. And I was starting to write a book. I thought one of these three things will be the thing.
Something's going to
Wow.
hit.
Something.
Yeah.
One of these things has to
That's
work.
it.
And I wrote a play, and I invited Emma to a reading of it. And at that point, we hadn't been in regular contact for a few years since college. And then Emma sent me an email the next day and said, would you like to write a book together?
Let's do
And I
this.
was like, I'm saying yes to everything right now. And
Amazing.
And then we got married, basically.
You got creatively married.
Yeah, we got creatively married.
Amazing.
And Emma, so for you, you had been working on your own for how long before you found the partner? And I assume there was a reason why you were saying, let's do this together.
Yeah, I mean, we had this tremendously informative experience of being nannies on the Upper East Side at a time where being Caucasian and being American citizen and being a college student, that trifecta, it was that was a minority population in that workforce. And it had left a real hangover on us on multiple fronts. So I couldn't shake the experience in a lot of different ways and was trying to make sense of it. But that was part of one of many psychodramas of being in my early 20s in New York as a chick, right?
Yeah.
It's just one plot line running. But I had always been really wanting to facilitate and working with groups of people and figuring out how to kind of optimize the experience of working together and creating together. And I was doing that right out of school. We both say in quotes, we graduated from nannying, and I was pursuing that in nonprofit and in other ways. And I actually was enrolled in the org psych program at Teachers College to get a master's in the work when Nanny happened.
Wow.
And was a little ways into that when the media around Nanny became so acute in New York that I couldn't have the anonymity that I needed. I remember was working in I were visiting nurse service of New York, and I went in. had been working with a group of hospice workers, and I went in to do the session, and the administrator had the post on her desk, which was a day that listed what we had been paid for a project in splashy letters. And I remember her just looking up at me, and I was like, this was the moment that I have to make a decision about this. And we were very blessed at that point, had been had our second book deal. And it was, you don't turn down being a full-time writer in Manhattan. You just don't do it.
You don't.
Thank God. So
Can I jump back? I just want to touch on a point that you just brought up. When you were kind enough to talk with me about your experience with collaborative writing, you talked about something that you had in common, that, to use your words, you'd both been traumatized by nannying, the day in and day out of being in these seemingly aspirational but actually very unhappy family/work situations. That is what we would call a dark spark. You took this painful experience and you transformed it into your creativity. I don't think you were exaggerating when you said it was traumatizing. I think I don't think you were being funny. I think that was real. And as somebody who has worked for decades in jobs that were traumatizing to different degrees.
Soul crushing.
Yeah, I when you said that, I was like, oh, I recognized a truth in that. So first, I just wanted to confirm that you really did mean that when you said it. And also, I would love to hear how it was for you to take that dark spark and really make something out of it. I mean, you really made something out of it. Was it gratifying? Were you ever like, ooh, we're going to get in trouble?
Yeah.
I immediately flashed as you were asking those questions to being put on a bus from, I don't even know where. I know that we passed through Providence, Rhode Island, because
One of the islands.
sworn to myself, because I went to college in Brown. It was the most miserable year of my life. And I took the Peter Pan bus home every weekend. And I swore to myself when I dropped out of that school that I would never get back on that fucking Peter Pan bus ever again. And there I was, back on the Peter Pan bus, Providence, Rhode Island. And I sobbed. I just sobbed for 6 hours all the way back to New York, because this family had put me on a bus, and I knew I was never going to see this 2-year-old ever again. And
had you been terminated or?
Yeah, I mean, in that they put me on a bus. Did they fire me to my face? No.
They were like, we're taking you to the Peter Pan
We're taking
bus.
you to the bus.
It was a euphemism for being terminated.
Yes. I was like,
Whoa.
okay. And then she said, you can go to my manager. My manager will pay you. And I was listening to this REM song, the one that Michael Stipe wrote about Kurt Cobain, Let Me In, on repeat. Like, I would fall asleep.
This is the most emo story. Oh my God.
And for 6 months, it was like my heart was broken. I just wake up every morning with this pain in my chest. And it was devastating. That was my last job. It's like, I can't do this again. It's heartbreaking because you invest so much.
I was going to say, because of the separation from the child.
If this was a child who I was the first face she saw every morning when she woke up, and I was the last face she saw every night when she went to bed for a year. And to suddenly have that ripped out of my life, and to know that I never got to say goodbye.
It ripped out of her life.
Ripped out of her life. I never got to let her know that it wasn't her fault.
Have you ever reconnected with this
super crazy thing? She is friends with my cousin on Facebook. And so a couple of weeks ago, Facebook said, "Hey, do you know?" And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. And she kept her nickname from when she was really little.
Oh my
And she's gorgeous. She grew up, she looks very happy. It filled me with, she's a woman now. But it was really, really painful. Really painful. And so when Emma first said to me, do you want to write a book about nannying? It was like, no.
That's interesting.
That is the most, I thought it was the most heartbreaking, depressing thing I'd ever done. And I could never imagine that we could create anything that anybody would want to read. I mean, all I could think of was like clock watching and disrespect. And
which would have been a great alternate title to the Nanny Diaries. Clock Watching and Disrespect, starring Scarlett Johansson. Really strong. Really strong.
The French version.
French version.
Produced by a boy.
But I find it so heartening and so gratifying that you did take these experiences. That
I think that's true of every book we wrote. And I think what we realized with Nanny, it's the reason I was, one of the many reasons I was hooked for many years in it, is we really took something that, we took the heartbreak and we took the silencing of, I mean, those are two themes of a girl, of a woman's voice, in a workplace quote trauma. Every one of our novels is about it you know, it's usually the A plot, occasionally the B plot. I think it's always the A plot is that part of your identity. And when we started writing in 2001, that we saw that nowhere, not that we had done an exhaustive search, but when we it goes back to an old thing we used to talk about. When we were sitting around with our friends in our 20s talking in bars till 4 a.m, there was an element of boys or girls, or sex or romantic life or lack thereof. But the thing that was the 4 a.m. like hyperventilating in the bathroom was where you had to show up the next morning or the next night to work. It was that that relationship, where especially in Manhattan, or when you have to pay to be, it's pay to play, and and that we felt like it was such a disconnect that was the formative thing happening in our 20s, and what of course would go on and on, and each of the novels, it was a long process of kind of working backwards from trying to bring in a very funny and fun-filled way, but at the heart and kernel of that, fundamentally it's them and not you. You are not the asshole. They are the assholes.
It's hard to know that, especially in your 20s, though. I feel like it takes some life experience to really turn that around.
Yeah, we were always writing usually about 5 years out in age from our character. And I'll tell you, till the last book that we wrote together, where we were very close to age the character, which was utterly disorienting. And it was a constant state of texting each other being like, is this funny, or is this just a Tuesday? Is this interesting, or is this everybody? I can't, I think only Lena Dunham singularly has simultaneous perspective.
To be able to live and make work simultaneously is super, super tricky.
That's right.
You are the grand master of this.
Well, that's a trick. I mean, just to have a little bit of distance. But the thing that I am loving so much about what you're saying is, for all the people that are listening that are sort of looking into the spark file that is you, these experiences that you would love to just put in a lead casket and bury deep in the earth because they feel so painful or so toxic. There's sparks in them, their experiences.
That's right.
It's really remarkable that while you're talking, I'm like, yeah, this was traumatic for you. And somehow you did make satire out of it. You did make something that was funny out of it. But, I guess I shouldn't be so baffled, because so much comedy does come out of truly painful experiences.
But you have to be willing to go there.
You got to be willing to go there.
We always talk about that. Like, there are people with stories, there are people with talent, but you have to become friends with that uncomfortable feeling that you feel when you dig in or when you sit in front of a blank piece of paper. And that's the real skill that you have to have.
Well, the shift, going back to what you were saying, is that in the moment it's heartbreak because you think you're the asshole.
Right.
And then with a little bit of time, you get angry. And that's where the satire comes in. Because it's not until you get to, wait, fuck you.
Yeah.
that it becomes funny.
This was an amazing trick that you all pulled off, which was you were writing a book that I think was, I don't know who your dream reader, audience, avatar was, but you wrote a book that I think really spoke to sort of, I'll say, like a working class sort of person, but I think it was also totally captivating to those other characters in the book. I think it was really read by people who would be able to afford to have nannies. I think it was kind of a must read for them too.
It shocked us. I have a friend who was working at Goldman Sachs at the time, and his boss came in and pulled it out of his briefcase one morning to a room full of guys and said, "You all have to read this."
That's awesome.
I think it was sort of like, "Don't marry this woman," but it was I mean, we didn't think anyone was going to buy it, first of all. So that anyone did, and that it did cover such a wide strata.
Yeah.
Blew our minds.
Yeah. I have a question. We get a lot when we're teaching workshops. They're like, what if I want to write something and I'm afraid like it may make someone mad or disappoint them? And we're, of course, always encouraging to push forward. But I'm just curious, did your book make anyone mad? And what would you say to people who have that fear of telling stories that will, upset the apple cart a bit?
I think the apple cart has to be upset. But we got lucky. And I said this to Emma when we were working on it, because she was more nervous about.
Always, period. You're like, I was the more nervous.
Period.
I was the more nervous.
Were you terrified of that? Of like, oh my God,
I was
people.
terrified of all the things.
I'm with you, Emma.
Yeah.
I'm always like, they're in the middle. I'm like, they're coming for us.
Yep.
They're going to come for us so
Cattle
hard.
car
And
outside.
I said, if these people were capable of seeing themselves as behaving this badly, they would not have behaved this badly in the first place.
And Lamont.
Ooh, Anne Lamont
If they didn't want to be written about, they should have behaved better.
They should have been kinder to you.
Yes.
So no, we never heard from anybody.
Interesting.
I don't think they would have dignified it.
You're
and I'm sure they
fucking kidding.
Not
No,
one
I'm
reading, no
not
angry
one.
letter. No.
I'm sure they even pretended to people that we had not worked for them. Or they would do the flip side, which is, oh, did you see? Oh, I know it's so. She used to complain to me about those other people all the time. You know, they'd find a way to.
It certainly wasn't us.
Just out of curiosity, I'm going to ask this question. You can choose not to answer. Was there anybody that you worked for in this context that you had a positive experience with, or were they all just fucking douchebags?
No, definitely.
And we wrote their names into the book. We did.
The good ones.
Yeah, the good families.
No, definitely.
That's
Good.
really sweet.
Oh, I would have left New York if it hadn't been for the good families. I just would have felt like it's not possible.
I to my nervousness at its core, so many, we could go on for days on it, but I would say that the candy apple hard shell at that point was that we would expose children or families that we work for, good or bad. I think this was a bigger mission than even the bad families. This was a bigger mission than that. And I want to go back to something you said. I believe that you can, and it's incredibly fertile and profoundly cathartic to go into the darker sparks. Equally passionately, I believe that it is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing. It should be a lot of work, because I think you're trying to make sense of suffering.
Yeah,
that's right.
And you're trying to make a mathematical sense out of it. You're trying to give it an arc. You're trying to find a beginning, middle, and end. You're trying to make it pay off. You're trying to wrap it up. At least we were in commercial writing. That's your job.
Yeah.
And I think that I think if to get the kind of catharsis that I got in each of our novels, in each of those journeys for myself as a creative person, required 6 months of 8 hours a day outlining, day in, day out. It required getting to chapter 9 in every book and having it fall apart every time in the first draft and having to go back to the beginning and then find your way back to chapter 11. It required us walking around in an agitated, afraid haze for 2 years at a time of discomfort of like, how does this come clean? What is she hooked on? How do we unhook it? What's the thing that can move?
And I always say to my writing clients now, there has to be a moment where she stops being you and becomes yours. And that's the moment where you liberate yourself to start making it better. I mean, I remember saying, like, Nanny has to be braver than we were. Nobody wants to read me on a bus. And that's liberating. But I think that's
genius.
and it's also the transformational power for people who are doing this writing.
Yes,
right?
and I'm
It's
thinking
healing.
of so many like fellow writers that I've worked with who, in the feedback session, people are talking about tweaking this or tweaking that. And they're stuck on, but that's what really happened.
Nobody cares.
Like, it
Gets you
doesn't matter.
Doesn't.
I love this. Like, it has to stop being you, but become yours. Oh,
That's fantastic.
That's good. That's a keeper.
That's good. I think that's good for not just writing. I think that might span more types of art and making. I think it's true for acting. I'm thinking about like developing characters and graduate school. I'm taking a real trip right now. But I think that there is something about that that is, I have to think about that more. That's good.
So I wrote a book where I was the head writer with a collaborative group of 10 writers. Wow. That came with its own very, very particular challenges. That was called Blue Man Group. That was, it's collaboration at its very best. But now Susan and I are preparing to co-write a book, The Spark File.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so we would love just you have some tidbits of advice on how to co-write a book. How can we get our little book off the ground? What would you say to us?
I think you obviously already share a shorthand, which I think is 90% of it.
Yes.
And you've already made all the tough decisions about the voice of the podcast and the scope of the podcast and your taste about who you want to have on and what's interesting to both
This
of you.
book's going to write itself.
We're halfway done.
I do think that you might take a lot of that for granted because you have that commonality. But if you were just getting into this and one of you was like, I think we should go and interview death row inmates. And you had to be like, you're like,
That's a good idea, Kim.
Great idea, Suze.
Then there could be so much conflict. So I think it's now just coming up with a workflow.
Yeah.
Do you want to go based on the podcast where you would write one up and you would write and you'd each do 10? As a coach, I will tell you that for the book, you want to have a ratio of 80 to 20% new content to already recorded content.
So 80 new. Mm-hmm. So 80 is going to be like, this is so good. This really is news you can use. I've wondered about that before because I see other people who work in a variety of mediums, even like a David Sedaris, where you're sort of like, oh, okay, I've heard a reference to that before in this other thing over here, but all of this is fresh meat.
Yes.
So you're saying 80% freshies. And then we can
20%
touch 20% of things.
Yes, what they call your greatest hits. So exactly, in a David Sedaris book, 20% of those stories will have already been in the New Yorker, and 80 you can only get if you buy the book.
Okay.
Interesting. Very good. And then
we just tricked you into giving us free advice.
Hey, thanks.
People pay you for this. It's good stuff.
What other, I don't know if there were challenges, pitfalls, things to avoid along the way?
I turn it now to you, Emma, because the work that you do, I feel like even though it's in the corporate space, it also touches on helping people to collaborate and work well together. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts for us or the listeners about how, and some of this I feel like you've already shared through the spark that you shared that I got to share with Cammie and the listeners.
Which was amazing.
But how to collaborate well, how to work well together. You have so much experience with this. You have so much wisdom. What you got?
Oh my goodness!
Share.
What a wonderful build-up. I think it's a combination of it's a combination of two primary ingredients, and I think Nikki will be delighted to hear me say this because it took me one of the ingredients I had to learn really the hard way and was not natural to me, and it took me 15 years and. Even upon our departure, I am only doing it now, which is there's half of it is, and this is the part she knows, is the heavy lifting. I think half of it is to not take for granted being explicit about expectations, being explicit about process, coming to agreement about how are we going to work together?
Yeah.
What can we expect from each other? When's a good time to call each other? If I call you or text you,
what do you prefer?
Right. Yeah. Or how soon do you need to hear back from me? Or do we need to hear back from each other? All the points where misunderstanding or, counter narrative starts to fill in and tension starts to build. Right. So part of it is being hyper explicit and not taking for granted that this is an organic thing that we're suddenly working together. As we say all the time, it's not meeting for brunch. It is not meeting for brunch.
Yeah.
On the flip side, also equally important is there's a fair amount of stuff that is not worth having a real conversation over. There's a fair amount of stuff, and this is where the entertainment industry, I think, heavily over indexes. But there's a fair amount of stuff that it's okay to just put a smile on and get through like a Thanksgiving dinner with relatives that you don't have the same politics on. Like, it's okay. And I think the constant conflicts I see in corporate settings are over-indexing and an absence of one of those two aspects of working together. Either everything's being everything has to be a real, authentic clarity connection, which is just not human. It's not natural. We're just not built for that level of work. And at the same, or on the flip, that there's a lack of really coming to clarity and agreement on things.
Can you give us an example of the second one where what is it? It really doesn't bear a deep conversation or processing about. It's just sort of like, it's okay to we're just going to like sort of skate over that. Can you give us an example of that?
Well, I think in my experience in the entertainment industry, that's like 90% of the time. And I mean, I say that with respect and affection from being off that fucking island. When the further you get away from it, it's astounding. And I think everyone, and I assume that's a fair portion of your listenership, the rest of the world is not operating like that so much. And I have tremendous respect. The industry's really figured out how to get the most from artists by having either pumping us full of fear or pumping us full of bullshit. I love that. That's genius. Why don't you write up, you know what, shoot it over. We're waiting, but I'm going to send it over to so-and-so. We're going to wait. Tell you what, no, just write it up. No, just write up another version. Could you do another? And no, she's really eager to read it, right? Like we're, okay, yeah,
breathless excitement.
We should, let's sample it and do that. Or the alternate of like, I liked it until this. I don't know. We'll see. We may think about it. And then, of course, the two of us huddling back, like, they can't think about it. Let's get a different version. We can't let that be the last version. So it's genius, right? It creates keeps everybody working for free a lot.
That's true.
So it's genius. And it's not like other industries are immune from that, elements of that. But the amount of not real conversations being had is predominant. And in corporate settings, there's a different kind of that. But on the flip side, people who are well versed and efficiently maneuver through the entertainment industry with the least amount of energistic drain, to my observation, are people who don't take it personally and are able to just kind of be in the malleable flow of truth. And what's real. And sure, we're vibing. This may go somewhere. It may go nowhere. You may like this thing. I'm going to spend 20 minutes on it. You may not like this thing. They're able to, and Nikki, fundamentally, to her profound credit, is just innately wired to be in that space. I give a lot of credit to New York City private school system. But I mean that with tremendous sophistication and with heart and authenticity. Nikki doesn't move through it in an inauthentic or bullshitty or untrue way. She does it from a very grounded and authentic place. She's just really able to gauge what's real and what isn't. And maneuver in a way that doesn't drain her battery. And I spend most of my corporate work with executives who are moving from up into the top tiers of the enterprise, where so much of it is political.
Yep.
And I find myself spending much of my time just translating what Nikki said to me so many times.
What would Nikki do?
Yeah. I'll share just as a specific example of one of my many breaking points of why I was not wired to this. We were at a meeting with a producer in Soho at a great restaurant. It was always a great restaurant, and for one of our books, and the producer was throwing out all sorts of ideas of what could happen to this book as a movie that made me want to kill myself. And it was just fundamentally at every front, wrong on top of wrong. And I thought I was doing a decent job of sort of delicately
masking,
pushing back and trying to push us, gently. Oh yeah, but maybe it would be better if try this on. Oh, but maybe. And we got out into the street, and Nikki was like, you cannot do that. You cannot. I think this is when we got to the phase of just turning to each other and saying, you cannot do that. And he's like, you cannot do that. You cannot, in a first meeting, you cannot be blocking like that, or that will be the end of where this could possibly go. And I broke down in tears, and I was like, how do I know when it's real? I'm so sick of being this disoriented. I don't know when we're having a real conversation, and I should be engaging. When does that happen? And she said, and I now make millions off of saying just this to executives. She said, you will know because there will not be good food, the lighting will be bad, and a lawyer will be in the room. And all three of those things need to be happening before you say no to anything. And I was like, oh, so helpful.
Whoa.
And it's proven to be true.
That is some high
there's
level
no
advice.
Good food. The lighting is bad.
The
and a
lawyer's
lawyer.
optional, but usually there's donuts.
lawyers-
It's like we've gone from
the
like
lawyers-
smoked salmon plate.
The lawyer's
to like,
theoretically in the room. The point is we're at there's a contract in play.
It's
Like, there's
real
a
work.
yeah.
It's real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just sort of like speculative,
Yeah.
like, maybe there could be 3 dogs and the dogs could talk, but the owners can't hear the dogs talk. Like you're talking about
Yes.
real substantive work
yeah.
happening.
All the grace
Yeah.
notes will go away, and then fight like hell.
Yeah, yeah. And and from that
Nice.
point on, I was 70% more oriented. It was invaluable. You should hire her as a coach if you're in the entertainment industry. It is priceless.
I wonder how did you develop this intuition that you have, or I don't know if it's like a bullshit meter or like an intuition about what is real and substantive and what is.
I wish I could tell you I knew how I developed it or encourage other people to develop their own. But I do think it did have something to do with growing up in New York City and the figuring out very early, because there's so much inauthenticity. There's so much, just cheek kissing and seeing people who have said horrible things about each other and then they go to the event.
Right.
And figuring out, but that what if that is actually genuinely toxic and has long-term bad repercussions? And what if it just keeps people moving? And there's really like, it's fine,
fine.
like whatever, no harm, no foul. And sort of learning that you can be in that as long as you're fully conscious of where you're, smiling at somebody who kind of thinks you're an asshole, but let's just get through this meeting and it's fine. Versus those moments where you really have to dig in, because if you are untrue to yourself on any level at that moment, there will be no coming back from it. So yeah, I think New York City, it's a little piranha tank. That's a great training ground for the entertainment industry. Mm-hmm. Speaks well of neither thing.
Did you find that having a partner while navigating that, like those things in particular, was beneficial?
I think there's a strange challenge, thinking specifically of Los Angeles. They are so easily threatened, which you would not think because they have all the power, right?
Yeah.
But there was something about 2 of us always showing up that I think put people on edge a little bit.
Wow.
They felt a
that's
tiny
perceptive.
bit ganged up on, even though we were always, as Emma would say, white soft underbelly, hi. But it just sometimes would feel like a lot, also because frequently they were a little bit charisma challenged. And so we would have to keep trying to dial it down. But I think that in those moments, probably being one person, we may have gotten farther just because they would feel like they were still completely in control.
Right.
I think because they're going to come out of the meeting as powerful as we
Yes.
think they are, and there's going to be someone else screaming at them,
Right.
going all the way up to the top of the
Yes.
chain. So everyone, I think that is the thing about Los Angeles that I find kind of palpable. Everyone's terrified. They're all
Yeah.
vibrating all the time
Terror.
with this level of fear that I personally find exhausting to be around.
And less so in New York, you think?
I do. I think because there's just constant checks and balances, which is, I think, that ratio of Democratic states to Republican. It's population density. Right? Even the most famous, successful people I know still take the subway sometimes.
Right.
They're still having to navigate Midtown to get to their car. They're still seeing real struggle, real adversity. And so, and other people doing other things, like whether it's through your kid's school, but you're surrounded by people who are not in the entertainment industry.
Yeah,
so
true.
there's a dollop of perspective.
That's true. Yeah.
You are both so wildly creative, and it is manifested in so many different ways in your writing, in the entrepreneurial things that you're doing with your lives. At this point in your life, or even looking back, do you have any creative advice for us and our listeners? It could be really specific. It could be like really wide open.
I would say pick a tiny goal and do it consistently.
Bird by bird.
Inch by inch.
It's so much better. My clients who set these big, audacious, hairy goals, they get so overwhelmed and panicked so fast. And I think it's important to pay attention to that biofeedback. A tiny goal, and for me, it's 250 words a day on whatever I'm working on creatively, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But if I do it every single day, by Friday, I feel great. In a year, I'll have a first draft.
Yeah.
So that is my advice. It's not particularly artistic
No,
advice.
it's
great.
so
It works.
practical. Small assignments.
Small
I love it.
assignments.
What do you got for us, Emma?
I think my advice is it may not be a book. And what I mean by that is I'm looking back over my life so far. I'm so grateful for storytelling. I wouldn't be here if it didn't exist. And I think I've had clients who came to me. I frequently get the clients through the finished thought that we share of people coming to write a book who end up not needing to write a book. And I don't know if that's just how it's shaken out, or the synergy of I'm the person who has left book writing. I promise I'm not breaking them of it. But I think people have been waiting their whole lives to write this story, and yet waiting their whole lives to never tell this story, right? And I find that when I have gotten people at that tension point where like this is the thing that they have to do, and it's the thing they can't do, and doing the deeper work with them of what is this? I have one person who came around this, and what was really sitting under it was a desire to make music.
Yes,
and now he's making music all over the place in his life. And it took about 2 years, some working with me, some doing other kinds of work to find that, but he has recalibrated his life.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that was missing. And we circled and circled around, is this a book?
I love it.
And I think for myself as well, that when I'm coaching with clients, I'm doing exactly what I would do outlining with Nikki. I'm holding the whole thing they're saying, and I'm asking a series of the same questions. Like, what is the piece of this that can move? What's the part of this plot that's not fixed? Like, where can we find, what's the piece that can move? Where's the place where you're hooked? Where do you, as the heroine, like, where are you telling yourself the stories? I'm doing exactly in my brain what I did, outlining and realizing for me, it wasn't the books.
Yeah.
It was the
coaching practice.
It was the coaching practice and the catharsis. It was moving this protagonist from utterly stuck to utterly unstuck.
Wow.
So great. It may not be a book. It may not be a musical. It may be a podcast.
Right.
It may be a dance piece.
And we've had that as
Yes.
well. We had things we had books that became screenplays that went back to being books that went on to become working like. And I think people lose years stuck on the end product. And I know it's cliche, but you gotta surrender and dig deeper to like, this is the thing, but what is it? If I let go of the end product, what
form might it take?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
The two
That
of
was
you.
good.
It was good.
Is there a creative thing that each of you know you need to do before you're done?
I am doing it right now. When Emma and I separated, I'd had this idea for a book for 10 years. And Emma kept saying, please write this, please write this. And it took a few things happening. My mother had to die. I needed to have the space to write this. And it's taken such a long time. It's embarrassing as we head into the holiday season. People are like, so what happened to that book? I'm like, oh, the one you asked me about last Thanksgiving? Still working on it.
On its way.
Things of quality take time.
They
do.
They really do.
I've just been marinating in this. And it's
doing
about forgiveness transcending death. So it's not something you just like crank out.
Wow.
But it's been one, and it has been the thing. I mean, I looked hard at myself at 40 when Emma and I separated, and I said, okay, you might have a very limited window of time. You have no idea.
Right.
Like, what is the thing you have to have done?
Yeah.
And I've done it. I don't know if anyone's going to read it, but I do feel so much better for having done it.
Yes.
Almost finished.
Yes.
Love it.
I thought the thing that I had to do was a musical.
You don't say.
Really?
And we spent years. I had a headache for 2 years. Like I woke up and went to bed with a headache.
Interesting.
Musical writing is heart writing. It's not brain writing.
Yeah.
And after 15 years of writing my brain, I got a lot closer. But I just think it's Jesus's work. I thought it was Jesus' work when I was 5 years old. All to say that the writing of the musical process of it's not a book helped me to realize that I needed to let go and really step back and look at what's the song I need to sing. And I sitting here answering this, and I know it seems corny, and I'm sure in one lens it's utterly codependent, but when I look back over the 15 years of working with Nikki, probably one of the most, if not the most painful themes that came through, the points where we were that like lover-esque heartbreak, who are you that I married moments, were the spike moments where Nikki, this book, this part of her independent creative brain would spark up. And there were times she wrote, we had a terrible fight. Nikki like wrote for something else and never told me. And I can still tell you what I was wearing the moment I found that out. And, we had, but it was like this bird that would sort of fly up on the other side of the room. And it was this specter of like, utterly intense, like I don't know where I am in this, like I know that's a ride she
we
has
talked
to take.
about this in the Spark, where if you said from time to time 4 amazing pages would be shared, and you would be just shaking your head and crying because you knew it couldn't, it didn't hew to the genre essentially.
And I knew it was something that was never meant and couldn't be for me to be in with her. Like I just knew that was not a boat I could get in. And I know it sounds crazy, but I like her doing this. And now the next thing that she's on to her writing finally, fully, freely, unfettered, like the whole thing. And I don't know how to explain it. I tried to when we talked before.
I thought you explained it beautifully.
But it is the thing that needs to happen. Like that's the last creative thing I feel at this point in my life I need to do. I had surgery a year ago, and the blinding thing, like among other, my children. I have children. I love you very much, more than Nikki's writing. But it was like I need to know that she's going to do this. I feel fiercely protective of it. Like I read it, and it's like an out of body experience. How I imagine having my children growing up and maybe walking down the aisle or whatever they do in their lives. But so I share that also because, and I share with you, people who we're so afraid to separate in our partnerships and our collaborations. And I wish to God someone had cornered me and sat me down and said, your love for her, what you've done together, your love for her brain and your love for her work and its voice and what it does in the world and what it does for you, like that's going to be that's the headline. Like that's the thing that's going to stay with you, and the pride, the connection I feel to it of like having been any part of that. So I just wish someone had told me, you don't get small. You think you're going to disappear and that's going to be the thing, but you don't disappear. And in fact, like there's so much, it is like, let them go. And if they come back to you, whatever that, like set it free and shoot it or whatever that is.
I don't think it's shoot it. But you feel like the thing that you needed to do during your time on this planet, one of the things that you needed to do that was so critical was sort of stepping to the side so that her writerly voice could rise up completely unfettered.
Yeah, I think that the last creative thing in this mode of creativity that I needed to do was, I don't know, it's not really, I don't even say stepping aside.
Surrender or?
Yeah, I needed to surrender and just lift my arms to her. I needed to just do it, and it's proven, it's given back, and it keeps giving back. Every time I read a sentence of it, I think about the book randomly in the shower, like not like in an inappropriate way, but
settle down, everybody.
But it's a gift that keeps on giving, and no one tells you that. I think you think you're just gonna, and
let's tuck that in the back of our mind. I feel like we've been making stuff together for a long time, but this little endeavor is sort of more in its infancy, but we need to stick it back there in the back of our minds for
I'm not
going
to shoot you.
Emma said, if I love something, shoot it.
You heard it here first.
She said it. This is a Laura Camion question that I love. I ask each of you, what's it all for? What is it all for?
That is literally what I spent the last 4 years trying to answer. What is it for?
What's it for, Nikki?
Gosh, I grapple with this all the time because sometimes I think I'm not a useful human. And then I come back to, bear with me. But when you go to a museum and you see really ancient things like tiny little cups, and they were utilitarian objects because everyone was starving to death and you didn't know if the crops were going to fail and your lifespan was 30 tops. but you still took the time to make something beautiful. It is in our hard wiring to create beauty and to appreciate beauty. And who knows why? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't ensure the survival of our DNA. It's not for the good of the species, but intrinsically, however we were created, we need to have that emotional connection. So I don't have this on a good authority from anybody, but I think it's all for love.
I love it. And we're all just making it up as we go along. So that's as good as any.
Great one.
Emma.
I think that it's the comfort. I feel like so much of the suffering that I put myself through and have in life is spinning out on like feeling alone and feeling like shame and sort of spinning out on myself. And every time I wrote and every time I coach, it's just reaching in to someone and saying, oh man, come on, fuck it. Like,
You got this.
Yeah, you got this. And I think anytime, and that is what Nikki did for me on a daily basis. It's what we did for each other. And that's what it's all for. I think, title of show, I can't barely speak about it because it was religiously a sequence of, in a way that I had, as I said, never heard articulated, still have never heard articulated. Like just beat for beat was like this is, I feel so relieved by this. Like it was such a release of
This is collaboration.
This is collaboration.
Creativity. This is
Messy.
the
Like,
fear.
we're not the only crazy fuckers.
right. But it's like it is this fucked up and this incredible,
Yeah.
And I think like that's back to Hollywood, back when I worked with corporate people. It's like it's both things. You got to be really militant about sorting out your shit, and you got to take a lot of shit and let it slide off your fucking back. Both things,
Both things.
But it's back to like it's not you, it's me, or it's not me, it's you. It's that same thing. Like it's just, I think what's all for is just to reach out to someone and be like, let's take it down a notch. Let's take it down a notch.
Best what's it all for we've ever had on the show.
Taking it down a notch. Who or what is sparking you these days? Tell us
Phoebe
something juicy.
Waller-Bridge. Oh my God.
You both feeling that?
Yeah.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
The name on everyone's
Did you go see the
tongues.
Fleabag in the movie theater so you could see
No,
the...
not yet, but it's still playing, apparently.
It is?
It's going to be for like 6 more months intermittently at Film Forum. Not Film Forum, IFC.
Yeah.
They're going to have it in rotation. No, completely obsessed. You were
so
obsessed with season
cool.
1. I was the Johnny come
No.
lately who didn't fall in love till season 2. Then I watched Crashing
Season 2,
and
yeah.
both seasons of Killing Eve. And
You are all Phoebe
oh
Waller-Bridge.
my God,
all the
anything. If
time.
there's a video out there of her 5th birthday, I want to see it. Like she is just, also I think because my dad's English and I grew up partially in England, like her obsession with small animals, the hamsters and the guinea pigs and the like. Have you seen her on Stephen Colbert talking about casting the guinea pigs?
No.
Oh
did
my
we
God.
miss
They
this?
actually had to cast the guinea pigs for the live show at Bleecker
Oh
Street.
my
Of
God.
And they were
course.
given headshots of the guinea pigs. I love that woman. I will do anything for that woman. What about you, Emma?
I mean, yes. I think after season 2 of Fleabag, they should have just broken everything. Like we should all just be like,
That's the
"And we're out."
We're good.
TV's done.
Yeah. I've late at night now to go to sleep. I read McSweeney's things and send them to Nikki at 4 a.m. And then have to say at 11 a.m. I know you jumped right past this because you jumped into your day, but you should go back to your 7 a.m.
really go
text
back.
and read this. I feel like McSweeney's where I'm so Johnny come lately, but it's like all the things I love, right?
It's delightful.
But it's so interesting how it's so hard to land those planes. As like the tiny little absurdist essays are so easy to start and so hard to end. So
They're nailing it at McSweeney's.
Yeah, well, much of the time, but I just love the effort. So yeah, that's
Those
some
are
of the
great
other places.
sparks.
Yeah.
Those are good sparks. Will you tell us where our listeners can find you in the world?
Well, collectively, we are at thenannydiaries.com and thefinishedthought.com for people who want coaching or advice or just to say hi. And then then I'm also at nicolaweir.com. Why you need any more information about me, but I'm also there.
We do. We can't get
We're going to Phoebe Waller-Bridge you so hard. We want it all.
And then Emma, if we want to be coached by you, where do we go?
You can find me at The Advisor E, as in the letter E, theadvisore.com.
Oh, friends, that has to be it.
We hope this put another bunch of sparks in your file. Listen, if there's a spark you'd like us to explore, or if you've taken a spark and you fanned it into a creative flame and you'd like to share that, please email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We'll even take your feedback. But you know the price of admission. First, you have to share a creative risk that you've taken recently.
And be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, rate, 5-star review it. If you like this podcast, share it with people that you love. If you didn't like it, agree to disagree, dude.
If something tickles your fancy, I know, but it gets me every time. If something tickles your fancy and gets your creative juices flowing, we are writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that's been knocking at your door. It's your turn to take a spark and turn it into a flame.
You got to motif it. You got to bas relief it. You got to paint a giant flower and Georgia O'Keeffe it.
You got to take it and make it. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We totally love you.
Right back at you.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I wanna make or how I wanna be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.